Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear participants, this review talk or PowerPoint is to wrap up what you have learned about the review of the literature. So it's going to be a review of what you learned about defining what you want to look for, how to find it, how to read it, how to save it, how to manage it, and at the end, how to actually write a review, literature review for your research. And so the presentation will go through first why we review the literature, then the steps of the review process, and it will end up with the actual writing of the review. And so if I start with the first one, which is why do people review the literature? Now, there are two main reasons. You can review the literature because you want to keep up to date. You want to update your information. So you need to know what is new. Or you review it because you would like to write a review. So it is just for update, or you would like to write a review. If you are doing it for the sake of update, it could be only you, which is for the individual, a practitioner, or a teacher, an educator, or a student. They would just like to follow up certain areas of knowledge and keep up to date in that particular area as an individual. But sometimes groups of people, teams of people actually carry out what they, or organize what they call a journal club. And in that journal club, they identify an issue and they assign it to one of them, and that person will go and review the literature and then come with either one paper or more than one paper which is up to date, and then they discuss it, and maybe they recommend some changes in their environment, whether it's a learning environment, a teaching environment, or a practice environment. This is for updating at an individual or a group in the form of a journal club. Now, to write a review, you can write a review for a research article or a thesis, as students do. You want to review literature review because you want to conduct some sort of research. You want to put it in the proposal, and later on you will expand it and write it in the manuscript, whether it's a paper or a thesis or a presentation in a conference. You can also review the literature because you would like to write a narrative review. You select an issue or a topic, then you review the literature and you summarize the literature in the form of a review or a narrative review or an overview, and you publish that. Or you review the literature because you would like to learn about a particular topic you already selected, and you would like to know how that topic was covered. Was it covered satisfactorily or not? And if you want to scope it because you want to make sure that it is research worthy or review worthy or not. And then you cannot actually continue with the review or with the research, then you publish it as a scoping review. So you review the literature for the purpose of preparing for research or preparing for a review, and then you can also publish it as a scoping review. Finally, you can also review the literature to write a more comprehensive, systematic, or integrative review. These are the reasons why people review the literature. Now, maybe you can find some in the literature or in the websites, online, here and there, different types of classifications of types of reviews. For example, if we take this classification, it is speaking about the types of reviews, of literature reviews, and they are classified into argumentative reviews. You review the literature because you want to support an argument. You review it as an integrative review, as I told you earlier, critical reviews, to add new perspective on a topic. You review the literature and reach a conclusion which is not addressed in the individual researches, or you would like to conduct a historical review which analyzes historical literature to show relevance with the recent developments. Also, it can be a methodological review, and this review provides a framework for analyzing literature at different levels. And then we have the systematic review. I mentioned it earlier. Also, like the integrative one, critically evaluates and summarizes all the existing research work to define a research problem. Or a theoretical review, and this is the type of review is to examine the available theories and relationship between them. Similarly, it also helps to develop a new hypothesis. So this is a different type of classification of types of reviews. But let us come back to this very important classification of writing reviews, and we are going to concentrate on the first one, which is writing a review for the purpose of research. Now, for research, you survey and discuss the literature in a given area of study. And it's a very concise overview. What has been studied, argued, and established about a topic. I would like to go through that, and then when I do that, you will group the related works together and discuss them, discuss the trends and developments rather than focusing on one item at a time. So if you want to review the review, you read a number of papers and then discuss the trends and not actually take one item and discuss it. Now, the systematic review, the review for the research, the literature review for research, evaluates previous and current researches in regard to how relevant and or successful it is and how it relates to your own research. So this is one more reason. And then this review provides a background because you use it as a background for your study, the proposed study. And this background might consider one or more of the following aspects. Now, it can consider the theoretical background, which talk about the past, present, or future. The clinical practice one, previous or contemporary. The methodology, it can be used, different changes in a particular methodology or research method. It can address previous findings, what did they find, and it can also address the rationale or relevance of the current study. You use the literature review to discuss to support your study. Now the literature reviews are designed in a way that they provide an overview of sources you have explored while researching a particular topic. And this particular aspect will ensure the reader, and this reader can be just a reader of your paper or a reader of your proposal to approve it or not. So it will ensure that you have covered the area of your particular topic satisfactorily, so that you demonstrate to your reader how your research fits within a larger field of study. Now, the purposes are summarized beautifully in this infogram. This infogram actually lists the purposes as being, these are actually 8 purposes. For example, you want to find out what information already exists in the field of your research. You might want to identify the gaps in the literature so that you justify your research. You might need to find other people working in your field. You review the literature and see who is also working in this field. You can identify major seminal works. You can identify main methodologies. and research techniques. You can also identify main ideas, conclusions, and theories, and establish similarities and differences. Also, you can use it to provide a context for your own research. We call it the scoping, the different type of scoping. It helps you define your scope of your research, and then it will show relationship between previous studies or theories. So this is one way of actually defining purposes or uses of the systematic of the literature review. Now, how is it done? How is it done? What are the steps? What are the steps? Now, these are simplified. These are simplified steps. First, you need to locate the literature. But as we go along, we will go into some details. I know you already studied. You were already told about how you define your keywords. Where do you go? How do you identify the relevant literature and so on? So you identify the context. Then once you find the material, you read it. You read the key text you identified, and then it is not only reading, you analyze and evaluate critically. And then you write the literature review, you synthesize, bring them together, and then you organize. This is a simplification of the steps, 3 steps. But if you look at other diagrams, for example, this one, these 3 I mentioned earlier, the 3 ones, the find, read, and write. But for example, to find the literature, you need to identify your question, you need to review the discipline area, you need to search the literature, and you need to manage your reference. So even citation management is part of the finding part of the previous diagram. And then the second step is you read them. And here it just says critically analyze and evaluate, and then you synthesize and write. And these 2 are the writing part of the reviewing of the literature. So this is another way of putting it, and we compared it with the previous infogram. So to put this in summary, you search for the literature, and then you sort and prioritize the literature, analytical reading of these papers, then evaluative reading of the papers, then you compare across the studies, and then you organizing the content, and then you write the review. So the reviewing part includes the sorting, the analytical reading, the evaluative reading, the comparison, and then you organize them, and then you write your review. Okay, now, actually this process I just mentioned in 3 different ways, depend on the main purpose of your literature review. If you want to review the literature to write a review, is it a review for a thesis or a paper, a new research, or is it for the writing of a narrative review, or is it for scoping or writing a scoping review? Is it for the writing of a systematic review? It depends on the purpose. But for all of them, you have a preliminary review, which aims at enlightenment. You read because you would like to know more about this topic or an area. So this is for the purpose of enlightenment. If you are now targeting enlightenment, you look at reviews found in the WHO site, for example. You read books and review sites. You read publications of associations and organizations in their sites. And then the comprehensive, this is for the enlightenment review. While the comprehensive review looks for systematic reviews and journal articles. So it depends on the purpose of your review. Now, for searching, to search, you specify what you want to search for, the keywords. And then, depends on what you want to look for, you decide where you want to look for that. The sites and the databases. And then how are you going to search? Which search engine are you going to use? And then, of course, you identify where exactly and how to keep your references which you find actually saving and managing these references. So this addresses the issue of searching. And so you have something what is called the search strategy. You identify the key concept term, then you select the relevant databases and resources, then you combine the search terms with Boolean operators, and then you run the searches in selected resources, and then you review and refine the search results. You can refine, you can do it again. You do what is known as contingency searching. You search, for example, if it's a very rare topic or a very rare clinical condition, then you use very few words, because if you use many words, you will not find anything. So contingency searching is very important. Now, searching for the, as I mentioned earlier, for comprehensive, you look for systematic reviews and sites. And also you can ask people, and this is very convenient and easily accessible, especially when you are just being enlightened. You ask your colleagues, you ask your seniors, you ask your teachers, you ask them, generally speaking, what is known about this topic in general, and they can help you. Now, there are traditional online sites, and these can be a starting point, because maybe they are not quite updated. So you can also check online text-based traditional sites. Now, you can also check primary non-appraised sources, primary published publication, but direct from the oven. For example, you go to individual journals. Every day you open a particular journal and read topics. Nobody evaluated them before, and these are traditional online sites referenced by editorial boards, evaluated up to date, but has time lag. Now, also you can use the search engines, and the most widely used search engines are Google, particularly Google Scholar, if you are interested in finding papers and scholarly material. You can also use PubMed if you want to search in very specific health-related publications. And then you can use the TRIP database. It is also for medicine, for health, but it triangulates. It searches in sites, and it searches in journal sites, and it searches in databases. So it searches everywhere and provides a summary for you. And this summary is usually filtered and can be further filtered. But for you to actually conduct an effective and efficient search, you can use these three major. But you can actually also go directly to the Saudi Digital Library and search in it. Also, you can look at secondary or pre-appraised sources. It's called the integrative literature, like the systematic reviews and the meta-analyses, etc. And these can also be found in individual journals, in books, sites, in clinical evidence like British Medical Journal, and in the Cochrane Library. You will find secondary pre-appraised sources. Finally, you can look at gray literature like theses, dissertations, and even inexperienced researchers and unpublished data, and also conference proceedings. And these are the latest but are still unpublished research, and this can help you identify people involved in the research, and you can get in touch with them. Other sites you can search for are the government sites, NGO reports, newspapers, magazines, etc. You can find some material there that helps you formulate your literature review. So this is the searching part of the literature. You already did it, and you actually tried it, and so on. Okay, then how do you review? I found a few papers here and there, 20, 30, or 50 papers, and then you want to produce an overview of the subject, issue, or theory under consideration, and the objective of the review, the objective of your review. And then you would divide the division of work and the review into themes or categories. For example, works that support a particular position, those against a particular position, those offering alternative approaches entirely. So you divide the work and the review into themes or categories. And then you go and the explanation of how each work is similar to and how it varies from the others. If I look at a paper, I will find an explanation of how it is similar to, or it varies from the others. Then you need to reach conclusions as to which pieces are best considered in their argument, are most convincing of their opinion. You consider and make the greatest contribution to the understanding and development of their area of research. You need to conclude to which pieces are best. And then this is while you are reviewing. Then you need to read the papers critically. You need to look at the methodology. Were the techniques used to identify, gather, and analyze the data appropriate to addressing the research problem? Was the sample size appropriate? Were the results effectively interpreted and reported? You need to be critical in your questions while you are reading through the literature, the papers you collected. You also look at the objectivity also. Is the author's perspective even-handed or prejudicial? Is it prejudiced? Is contrary data considered, or is certain pertinent information ignored to prove the author's point? You analyze that. The persuasiveness. Which of the author's theses are most convincing or least convincing? You check that when you are reading and reviewing the literature. And then the value. Are the author's arguments and conclusions convincing? Does the work ultimately contribute in any significant way to an understanding of the subject? And you also look at comprehensiveness. Did the authors cover all expected aspects relevant to the topic, or there are gaps? And importantly, these gaps, you need to identify the gaps. And why so? Because the gaps are necessary for justification of your research. Now, when you look at areas of similarities or differences, you look at the similarities and differences in research aims or hypotheses, in research design and sampling, in instruments and procedures used, how data were analyzed, the results or findings, and the interpretation. These are the areas of comparison between or across the studies. Now you set out, you want to organize. Now you want to organize the material for a review. You sort out your thinking on paper through maps and trees. For example, you take a feature like the concept map. The feature map classifies and categorizes your thoughts into tabular form. The concept map links between concepts and processes, or shows the relationship between ideas and practices. A tree construction shows how topics branches out into sub-themes and related questions, or represent stages in the development of a topic. Now, these are the steps of actually, I just summarize them. You first specify what you want to look for and identify keywords. You search for literature, you bring the literature and you save it. Then you review the literature using the techniques I explained earlier. Then when you come to the writing part, first of all, it should be a critical summary. If you wanted to use it for research, it should be a critical summary and not an annotated bibliography. And so when you come to organize your review, you can organize it chronologically, or by publication, or by theme, thematic or conceptual categories, or methodological way of organizing. You see, when we said how to review the literature, we also use these terms similar terms. The themes, the chronology, and the methodology are ways of organizing when you are reading, organizing the material which you are extracting. Now, when you want to organizing to write them, you organize them also either chronologically or by publication or thematically or methodologically. If I go back to the first, I said an annotated bibliography. What's an annotated bibliography? An annotated bibliography is a list of citations in a standard referencing style, each followed by a short paragraph called the annotation. Yani, so and so worked in this area and they published this paper, and in their paper I put a note. This is called an annotated bibliography. The short paragraph, usually 150 to 200 words, summarizes and evaluates the source. Annotated bibliography are usually arranged in alphabetical order by the author. And you may be asked to write an annotated bibliography as a standalone. And sometimes we ask you to write an annotated bibliography. We don't want it as a literature review for research. We want you to just evaluate a number of articles and write an annotated bibliography. This is different from the type of literature review you use for your research. Now, this is an example of the annotated bibliography, and as you can see, this is the reference itself, and this is the annotation. If I can show you another example, this is the reference and this is the annotation, and so on. And here, this is the first reference, this is a note, this is the second reference, the note, and third reference, the note, and so on. So this is annotated bibliography. If you are writing for research, don't write an annotated bibliography. You need to organize the material differently. Now, when you write a real literature review for research, you structure it in the way other issues, other themes, other conditions are expected, other activities. For example, if you organize a lecture, you organize it similar. If you have a practical session, you organize it in this way. Start with an introduction, giving the reader a quick idea of your topic, the central theme, or organizational pattern you will follow. You start with an introductory section, and then the body. The body contains your discussion of the sources. And then a summary at the end. You call it a conclusion and recommendation. What you have learned, what questions it raised for you, and how you plan to proceed, what seems to be missing. So this is how you organize. This is the structure of the review. And so when you are writing, as with any essay, the review should have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion and recommendation. And the length of each section depends on whether you are writing a brief literature review for a proposal, a research paper, or a whole chapter as a part of a dissertation. Each one of them will depend on what type of literature review. Now, when you write the introduction, and the introduction should provide the reader with the scale and structure of your review, because it serves as a kind of map. He will know that after this I am going to discuss this, and that. And it defines or identifies the general topic, issue, or area of concern in the introduction, and then providing an appropriate context for reviewing the literature. Now I am ready to actually tell you what have I found when I reviewed the literature. Now, this is about the introduction. Also, the introduction points out overall trends in what has been published about the topic. It may also point out the conflicts in the theory, methodology, evidence, and conclusions, or gaps in the research and scholarship, or a single problem or new perspective of immediate interest. So it paves the way for the detailed body of the literature review. It also establishes the writer's reason, point of view, for reviewing the literature. Why you review the literature will appear in the introductory part. Now, it explains the criteria to be used in analyzing and comparing literature and organizing the review, the sequence. You will say at the end, I am going to do this, and this. I am going to write at first this. I am going to organize it in a chronological order, etc. And when necessary, state why certain literature is or is not included. Maybe you will say certain publications old because they were old, they were addressing issues, blah blah blah. You will put that in your introduction, and then the introduction will point out overall trends in what has been published about the topic. Overall trends, conflicts in theory, methodology, evidence, and conclusions, and gaps, unexplained areas in research and scholarship. And as I mentioned earlier, the gaps are important. You need to mind the gaps and identify them to use them for justification of your current research. Now, this is repeated, I'm sorry. Now, when you write the topic, the body of the review, the structure is the inverted pyramid or the inverted cone or inverted funnel. So you start with broad, you provide an overview, you contextualize the topic within wider subject and introduce key theories and models. So you do that first, then you narrow it down, honing in on the literature that overlaps with your area of focus, and this can be broken down further into themes, this part. And then you become more specific. You now delve deep into the select few studies most pertinent to your research question. This is called the inverted funnel, the funnel or the inverted pyramid. So this is the approach when you write the body. Now the body depends on how you have organized your key points. Remember, I said earlier it can be organized chronologically or methodologically or thematically, which way of organization you did. And this one, for example, possible reasons for similarities or differences between studies are considered rather than a mere identification. Now, this is the inverted pyramid. Your literature review starts from generality to specificity. You start with the broad research interest, the general topic overview, how it is being broadly conceptualized, then identifying important subtopics within literature, then identifying gaps in subtopics and importance of those gaps, and then developing plans to address the gaps. Now you end up with specific manageable research questions and objectives. Now, you can group the research studies and other types of literature according to the common denominators, such as qualitative versus quantitative. You don't mix them up, approaches. Now, conclusions of the authors. For example, I studied 20 papers. 7 of them reached a particular conclusion. The other 13 reached a slightly different conclusion. So I group them together. Maybe the purpose or the objective of the research or the time. I will start with this particular era and then move into another era. So this is called the chronological arrangement. And then you can summarize individual studies or articles with as much or as little detail as each merits. It depends on how important is that detail. This is called comparative importance, and according to its comparative importance in the literature. Now, also in the body, you provide the reader with strong umbrella sentences at beginnings of the paragraph, and then signposts throughout. We already discussed this, and differing from that is I use signposts and brief so what summary sentences. You can conclude each paragraph by a summary point, so what, at intermediate points in the review to aid in understanding comparisons and analyses. And you can summarize major contributions of significant studies, the most important ones, and articles to the body of knowledge and the review established in the introduction. And then, very important, the issue of so what. Each section must be ended with a conclusive statement and why you wrote this particular section. Now, when you write the conclusion, you evaluate the current state of the art for the body of the knowledge reviewed. And then you point out the major methodological flaws or gaps in the research, very important, because also with inconsistencies in the theory and findings and areas or issues pertinent to future study. And this is important because it tells the reader where you are going with this literature review. Now you can conclude by providing some insights into the relationship between the central topic of the literature review and the larger area of study, such as a discipline, a scientific endeavor, or a profession. There are also pitfalls. The pitfalls include vagueness due to too much or inappropriate generalizations, a limited range, you didn't cover the topic satisfactorily, insufficient information, you found a number of articles but the information you extracted is insufficient, irrelevant material, you keep talking about something which is not quite relevant to your current research, and then omission of contrasting views, you focus on a particular point of view and you completely ignore the opposing one, or omission of recent work. You take papers which are a little bit old and you don't include recent works. Thank you very much for being patient, and see you later.